This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I am your host, James Just. With me is Mr. Richard Fields and John Cameron, who likes me to remind you that he is an author of a couple books. Go look for those if you feel like it. All right, gentlemen, we've got troubling problems, especially if you're from the libertarian perspective these days. Many state governments are ready and waiting to strip citizens of their rights, and depending upon which party you sit on, you're going to get mad at one party or the other. But from a libertarian perspective, they're both state governments, have been now and continue to be on a warpath of restricting us from our rights. So what's so different about 2024 than what's happened in the years past, especially say 2020? Why is the media all more upset now than they were 3-4 years ago?
It's interesting when we talk about government stripping rights from people. Libertarians kind of have a habit of saying that the federal government is worse than state government, which is worse than local government as far as stripping rights. But I'm not sure that's true. If you take a look at the smallest of all local governments, your local whatever they call it, home government, the people that manage your neighborhood local community.
Government. Your county.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the home. What's the word? Somebody help me out here. Yeah, HOA. Yeah, homeowners association. That's entirely voluntary, and they can be some of the most ridiculous Nazi type people in the world, saying you can't paint your house the wrong color, et cetera, et cetera. And they have a majority. If they have a majority that says so, then the majority rules. So,
no, isn't that
make that much difference? I mean, at the local school board level, the local school boards are either saying,
now you're talking.
You must put in the library all of these woke books about people with different sexual proclivities, or if you're on the conservative side, saying you can't have any of them. So depending on which side of the aisle you're on, Democratic or Republican, both sides of the aisle want to censor something. And libertarians, of course, don't want to censor anything. And we want to let you, at the HOA level, we want to let you paint your house turquoise if you want to. We don't care. So when you have the phenomena of government being able to tell other people what to do, or in this case, or in the reality of it, a majority of people being able to tell a minority of people what to do, it doesn't make any difference whether it's happening at the federal, state, or local level. And we've got an awful lot of people, an awful lot of individuals in this country who want to tell other people what to do, whether or not it affects them, the tellers, or not. It usually doesn't, but they want to exercise that control, and that, of course, is enabled by the whole concept of democracy. It's enabled by laws, legislatures, whatever, that make it easy for that to happen. And it's enabled by a media which will, in order to get readers or viewers or clicks, stir up emotions as much as they can in order to get, sway people to one side or the other. They'll do whatever they need to do in order to get people to read their rags.
Well, if it leads, it bleeds. And I absolutely agree with Richard. I think he's covered the ground pretty well. We, for some reason, we want our own personal freedom. Just about everybody wants to do exactly what they want, but they don't want to let other people do exactly what they want. And that's the wonderful thing about the Libertarian Party. What we want to do is make sure that everybody up to don't hurt people and don't take their stuff is good to go. We could talk about every single issue that every single problem that people are worried about has been either created by a government trying to fix a problem that they created, or that's it right there. Every single thing that we every single thing that we're upset about is government trying to fix a problem that they created. Yeah. So anyway, I'm good to go on this subject because just everybody. I mean, if there's a Supreme Court case that was argued today about, I think it's Placer or El Dorado County deciding to basically violate constitutional law, and they couldn't raise taxes for stuff. So they, in order for somebody to build a home on a plot of land, they charged them a $23,000 road access fee, and the Supreme Court's ruled on that being unconstitutional. I don't know how many times that is, but hopefully it'll get decided in the people's favor once again. Yeah, and that's another Pacific Legal Foundation and another private firm Supreme Court case that was argued. No, it's argued tomorrow. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and as I just read a story the other day about how an HOA is preventing a woman from putting in a fast charger at her house. So we've got governments on one side telling us we have to buy more electric cars, and then we've got these quasi-government entities telling us, well, you can't put a charger in your house. And so you've got so many layers of government with so many conflicting regulations and rules and laws that how can an average person even start to navigate all this stuff? You know, it's gotten ridiculous. But speaking of getting ridiculous, the DNC has issued a strongly worded letter to the New Hampshire Democratic Party over the party actually telling them to pound sand. They're holding their primary when they want anyway. And so, you know, the Democratic Party, who's sitting here, their biggest thing is protecting democracy this year, right? Everything's protecting democracy, but they're not actually acting very democratic in their primaries, are they? I mean, this is not the first case of the DNC running roughshod over local state and local primaries. Marianne Williamson can't get on a ballot. They ran RFK off the party because they were preventing him from getting on the ballot. And so now we've got, you know, New Hampshire. Of course it'll be New Hampshire, the freest state, whether you're Democrat or Republican, but telling them to go ahead and pound sand. We're having a normal primary. What do you guys think?
No, I think it's telling that we have an incumbent president who is so worried about competition that he's worried about the likes of Marianne Williamson. Come on, if she gets 5 or 10% in any election, primary or whatever, that would be a huge number. Not going to happen. And if they're worried about Biden losing in New Hampshire, well, maybe he should lose. I mean, this is the party that refused, while RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, was running as a Democrat, the Biden administration refused, and polling respectable numbers, I don't know, 10%, something like that. The Biden administration refused to give him Secret Service protection. This is a guy whose uncle and father were both killed by assassins, you know, within our lifetimes, being denied Secret Service protection. That's just macabre. And the fact that New Hampshire is probably going to be less friendly to Biden than their preferred state, South Carolina, may not even be true anymore. Biden's ranking, polling among blacks and working class people has been going down pretty dramatically over the last few months, a few weeks. So, Biden, may be able to win the primary overall, win the nomination, since he's essentially knocked everybody out of the running, or effectively knocked them out of the running. I'm not sure, but it's certainly not a ringing endorsement for democracy any way you want to look at it. Not only that, of course, he's trying to make sure that Trump can't win through legal means, with all the lawsuits against him and with all of the Supreme, the states like Colorado and Maine saying you can't be on the ballot, et cetera, et cetera. None of us are Trump supporters, obviously, but should people be able to vote for him if they want to? Well, if we're a democracy, they should. I guess really we're talking about whether or not democracy, as opposed to federalism, is the preferred form of government.
Well, it's yeah. Well, we got a duopoly right now, and they're, as we've all said many times, that you could slide a old-fashioned razor blade in between the two of them over their differences, but they sure scream like they got a lot. They both believe in lots and lots of rules for thee and not for me. They believe in exercising of power. They believe in the pork barrel. They believe in spending more money than they have, and they believe in controlling their enemies' rights, but supporting their own people's rights. So, something's got to give one of these days. There's a And then they, they get upset when people are mad at each other. Well, they pretend like they're upset when people are mad with each other. But right now, I think it's more obvious than ever that what they're trying to do is have people so upset that they do stupid stuff and they vote for stupid people because they're so fearful of the picture painted of the other person. And the fact that people won't educate themselves beyond, we as libertarians get bombarded by lunacy from both sides, so we have to go out and look for logical thinking. But there are people on what they call the left who don't even know somehow after all this time that Obama and the rest of them got in a room and made a decision to fake Russian interference in an election to keep Trump from winning. And the next election, they suppressed information about a laptop that was true. So there are people on the left who are still not aware of that, yet they're able to go in a voting room and vote. And there are people on the right who firmly believe that the worst threat in the world is somebody dressing up like a woman, believing they're a woman, and putting on a fashion show. So, we have dumbed down the populace so bad through the public school system that they're doomed to make bad, uninformed decisions over and over again. And I think that's the goal of the government, is to do that. That's what I think. Yeah.
I just can't get past the hypocrisy, just the blatant hypocrisy. How can these people come out there and talk about defending democracy and democracy's at threat while they're the ones actually working to subvert it? And it's so obvious that it's pretty hard to really for me to wrap my head around. Now, Richard, you are out flying the byways and highways and waterways of the world these days. What do you have from the field for us this week?
The report from the fields. To borrow an ancient curse, may you live in interesting times. 2024 is looking like it may be a very interesting year. We appear to be losing our proxy war with Russia in Ukraine, and it's an election year, with the two major party choices shaping up to be a clearly senile incumbent with a 37% approval rating, and a pompous narcissist who can't get over the fact that the last election was stolen from him fair and square. This could conceivably turn into a hot war. The deep state apparatchiks surrounding Biden know that their careers would all be toast if Trump is elected. They also know enough history to realize that it is very hard to defeat a wartime incumbent president. See FDR, who won his last election from his metaphorical deathbed. It's not hard at all to imagine Biden's supporters staging a Gulf of Tonkin-style incident in the Black Sea as an excuse to escalate direct hostilities with Russia. And if not the Black Sea, how about the Red Sea, where U.S. helicopters have already sunk some Houthi fast boats which were attacking maritime shipping there. The Houthis, rebel faction in Yemen, which has Iranian backing, have been attacking any boat they think is going to Israel in alleged solidarity with Hamas in its war with Israel. The U.S. has already moved considerable naval assets into the Mediterranean at one end of the Suez Canal and the Gulf of Aden at the other end. Even without getting involved in direct hostilities, the economic fallout from a blockade of the Suez Canal will force 10 to 15% of world trade to go around the southern coasts of Africa and South America. Add to that a drought has made the Panama Canal impassable for larger ships, and we have ourselves a supply chain problem. You remember supply chain problems from the pandemic, right? Or the lockdowns, right? They certainly helped accelerate our plunge into 9% inflation. You can bet that if the U.S. gets involved more directly in a war in Ukraine or the Middle East or China over Taiwan, which we haven't even mentioned yet, the Fed will be close behind with lower interest rates and money printing. That would inevitably cause inflation and most probably wage and price controls down the road. 2024 is looking pretty well interesting, folks. It's not all bad news, though. In Argentina, the second largest country in South America, a bona fide libertarian was just elected president. And he is acting like a libertarian as president, cutting bureaucracy, firing government employees, preventing demonstrators from shutting down transportation, drastic deregulation of the economy, and much more in just his first month in office. He has demonstrated that democracy can produce a libertarian-oriented government. He is fighting entrenched interests domestically from the previously entrenched Peronistas and internationally from socialists and those who benefit from big government all over the world. Not to mention big governments who see their model potentially challenged by a successful free market laissez-faire approach producing unprecedented economic benefits for anyone willing to work in Argentina. History has a way of recycling. 2024 will see two contradictory cycles: big governments and warfare looming in the US and much of the rest of the world, and freedom in Argentina. May freedom advance. This is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields.
Thank you, Richard.
Well done, Richard.
Yeah, Argentina is going to be interesting to watch these next year or two. It's, they have a long road to hoe, but they've gotten a good start, at least anyway, right?
Does anybody know if, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, James. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was done. So go ahead.
Well, no, I got a question. So the way I understand it is that it was last weekend that they're basically our version of the House and Senate had to turn down all the points of Milei's plan, or else they went into effect. So did they turn them down, or did they go into effect?
I've been looking for the news story that would give the information on that, and I haven't seen it yet. I know there have been some Peronista initiated court cases that would try to get rid of some of the labor regulations, but beyond that, I'm not really sure. It's an interesting question, and I'm sure that eventually the mainstream media in the United States and elsewhere will actually give us the answer to that question. If the answer is probably that they did not turn them down, which is why it's not getting reported on.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know, an expat that lives down there, unless, the outside world has managed to cut off all internet access. That might be the person to ask. I don't think I've got his email, but
yeah, Doug Barbieri, who's been on the show many times, is moved to Argentina, and we can ask him.
Yeah,
maybe
I think that'd be great to know.
Again.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about entrenched interest, fighting entrenched interests, which brings us up to our next story here that we've got. Big labor has been caught yet again in Michigan lying to their dues paying workers about having to pay full dues and kind of strong arm tactics that we all know big labor routinely engages in. Even the labor board, the Democrat labor board has kind of turned their back and says, no, these dealings here you're dealing with the auto workers union in Michigan are shady. And this is kind of the point is how many of these backroom shady deals are happening in these labors. Where's big labor biggest is the public employees union, especially here in California. They run the state. Yeah. And so if
teachers union,
big labor is doing that in places like Michigan and getting away with it, what are they going to get away with here in California as we're sitting here with a $68 billion budget deficit while the labor unions get everything they want?
I think you have to go to the source of the problem here. As libertarians, we have no beef with collective bargaining, with labor unions forming on a free basis and negotiating with employers. We have no problem with that. But what's happened over the decades now with the Wagner Act and Taft-Hartley and other labor laws and labor law enforcement is that the government has given a huge leg up to unions over management, particularly in the public sector. Not so much in the private sector, although it's certainly happening in the private sector with but overall, labor union organization in the private sector has been going down dramatically over the last 20 or 30 years. Not so in the public sector, because what you have is government officials who have been politicians who have been bankrolled by labor unions, being the people who negotiate with the public unions for pay and benefits. And since they have been bankrolled by the unions, guess what they are willing to do when they negotiate with those same labor unions? They're willing to give them a sweet deal. Sweet deals like bloated pension benefits, higher wages and salaries than they could possibly get in the private sector. And that, in a nutshell, is why we have real impending bankruptcy type problems facing both local governments like Stockton and Vallejo, and the state of California eventually, and probably eventually, well, it's a big part of the problem, although Social Security and Medicare are a bigger part of the problem at the federal level.
Absolutely. And you know, allowing people to negotiate, that's in the private sector, because I don't think we've drawn a good enough analogy for people. First of all, they're violating Janus Supreme Court decision left and right. Everybody knows, I hope, that Newsom had a state law ready to sign on his desk that said that they're going to violate the Janus decision that allowed people to opt out of union dues. And the state law says that they can't go find out about whether they can opt out of anything and get informed through their human resources department. They have to go to the union to find this stuff out. That's California for you. So over and over and over again. And in the private sector, it'd be like labor going to management and saying, we want a 20% raise, and management saying, yes, but you have to vote me a $10 billion bonus. And then labor says, sure. And nobody's worried that the company is going to go out of business because their costs are too high. But that's exactly what's happening in the private sector, and it's ludicrous. I don't know how to stop it, though, other than just take power away from everybody in public office. Well, that's an idea. I like that.
Yeah, they remove the power, and then the buying the politician no longer has value. So that's kind of the way to deal with it. And I know, as one of the reasons I don't personally want to be part of a union is because as someone who ends up who's better than everybody else at their jobs, I want to get paid more, quite frankly. And if someone's better than me, they should get paid more. If I do more if I get more productivity done with less oversight, I should get paid more than someone who does less with more oversight.
Yeah, one of the definitions of virtue or being good is being happy when people who are more skillful, more better than you are, get rich. Be happy for them getting rich because they're providing a good or a service that makes your life better. And one of the definitions of evil is being resentful of people who are making your life better because they get rich in the process.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of, we could talk about this one issue for hours, but as an author, I see billion dollar authors, and all it does is every once in a while I get jealous because I'm not a perfect human being, but I think to myself, well, I read their stuff and my stuff's as good as theirs. If I figure out how they did it, I can be rich and even more obnoxious than I am now too, if that's possible. I don't know if it's possible, but anyway, it's, jealousy is just poison. What I'd love to see teachers talk about that, how much they love the kids and how they want to do right by them. If they wanted to do right by the kids, they would look at successful training programs the world over, success in anything in the private sector. And what is that based upon? Rewarding the people who are better at the job. You would pay the top 10% of the teachers double what the bottom people pay, and you would pay them based on results. Okay, for every kid you get at grade level, you get to keep your job or your salary. For everyone above, you get a bonus. For everyone below, that bonus is taken away. If that pay structure was put into public schools, you know how quickly that Johnny and Jenny would learn how to read? It'd be tomorrow, bro. Let me tell you. But when there's no accountability and no punishment for failure and no reward for success, why bother?
All right, I'm going to move on because we've got a couple minutes left, and I know Richard wanted to discuss horseshoe politics. There was an article out of the New York Times, LA Times, by Jonah Goldberg, of all people, the other day, about now 2023 was the year he finally believes in the horseshoe theory of politics. Richard, can you explain to our audience real quick, what is the horseshoe theory of politics?
Well, the horseshoe theory of politics is the fascism and socialism join at the tips of the horseshoe. The horseshoe essentially closes itself when it gets too ridiculous or too extreme. Just like right-wing fascists are anti-free speech and authoritarian. Same way with socialists. They're anti-free speech and authoritarian. Their policies are exactly the same, and their methods are exactly the same. The only thing different is the rhetoric that they use to justify their evil. And then most of us are at the bottom of the horseshoe, suffering from the two extremes fighting with each other.
I think we're at the bottom of the horse barn, actually, suffering from, what they're doing, being trod on, and other things happening to us. But I absolutely agree, and it's hilarious how they can do. The left is I think way better at disguising their maybe they're more sanctimonious. They or maybe they believe their rhetoric better, but they're sure better at getting the deep state cover public media to promote it than the
Maybe
right.
in this
But
country,
it's
in
always
other countries, it's been the right. It kind of depends on who's in power. Whoever's in power tends to be able to get the sanctimony story better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I believed in the horseshoe theory of politics for a long time. All you have to do is step back, and you can see it.
Yeah,
and you can see how close the progressives and call them MAGA, whatever you want to call them, are. Fundamentally, their only real difference is abortion. That's really it. That's the only thing where there's that one dividing line between the horseshoe. That's it. And you take that away, and they're exactly the same in the end result. They're different only on the edges, only on the fringes. All right, are we finally getting rid of the outrage machine? According to a Gallup poll recently, only 32% of Americans say they trust the media a great deal or a fair amount. And
that many? Shocked.
Yeah, 39% said they don't trust the media to be fair or accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching and been a part of actually the media since the early 70s, and at one point there were 3 television networks and essentially 1 or 2 newspapers that controlled all of what you were able to see and hear on all radio stations, all TV stations, and all newspapers, because it's the New York Times, ABC, CBS, NBC. That broke down with cable news, and it broke down with the advent of the internet, so that there were a flowering of many voices. And now the networks and the major newspapers have a very small fraction of the attention that they once were able to garner. And they're fighting like hell to get it back by taking control of social media.
Well, now I'm going to have to cancel your all's voices because we are out of time. Thank you for being with me, John. Thank you for being with me, Richard.
Progressive.
And thank you for watching. We are out of here. Please remember to love everybody and have a good night.
This is Gail Morgan thanking you for watching the Libertarian Counterpoint each Thursday at 8 p.m. Channel 17 on Comcast